Hello and welcome to Newsmax TV. I'm John Bachman. Joining us right now from Washington, D.C. is Congressman Steve King of Iowa. He has been one of the most vocal critics of the Gang of Eight immigration bill passed by the Senate, and he also faced some sharp criticism recently from anti-tax crusader Grover Norquist, a fellow Republican who is on the other side of this immigration debate. Congressman King, thanks for being with us today.
Thanks a lot for having me on, John.
All right, so quickly, I want to get your reaction to what Norquist said about you during a recent exclusive Newsmax interview. But first, let's take a listen to specifically what he said. So you're saying voices like Steve King of Iowa, those voices will start to fade here in the near future. You know, King says, you know, with his district, what does he have to gain by supporting something like this when he knows his constituents do not? What kind of leverage does the House leadership, Speaker Boehner, have to, you know, if not convince Steve King of coming out in support of this, maybe just keeping a little bit quieter about his opposition?
Steve King could have been a senator in Iowa if he hadn't been self-identified as anti-immigrant as he has been in his speech. He's not electable statewide. So the cost to Steve King is he can be a congressman, but never anything else, never a governor, never a senator. And I think other congressmen want to vote for what's good for the country, not just what's good for the politics of their monochromatic districts.
So, Congressman, what is your response to Norquist's comments?
Well, in the first place, there isn't anyone that can fairly characterize me as anti-immigrant. That's a label that the open borders people have tossed around. They're conflating the terms anti-illegal immigrant and anti-immigrant as if it were the terms health care and health insurance. They did that in order to pass Obamacare. Now they're conflating anti-immigrant with anti-illegal immigration in order to pass Amnesty. So that's one trespass on the part of truth, justice, and the American way for Grover Norquist. And another one is the idea that they just essentially said that I'm voting for some reason other than what's good for the country. No, sir. Look at my voting record. It's very clear. I have voted consistently for what's good for the country. It's God, country, state, district, in that order, and I don't see a conflict, and there shouldn't be.
So this kind of highlights what some people are playing up as a schism in the Republican Party. We also heard from Norquist that Speaker Boehner, the Republican leadership in the House, is in favor of immigration reform. But I wanted to ask you what your specific communication has been with Speaker Boehner and his office on this issue of immigration reform.
We haven't been very active sitting down talking face-to-face on this topic, John, and most of the dialogue that takes place is in a more of an open forum, whether it's the closed-door session of the Republican conferences that we have every week, or whether it's communications that go back and forth from, well, through the media, for example. And you know, most of us that have been in this business for a while understand that when we talk through the press, at least the staff of the leader is listening, and they filter those things through into the speaker's ears and the leader's ears that are necessary. And I think that's it's how we communicate. And someone asked me, am I talking to leadership some months ago? And sure I am. I'm at least talking through the press. And I once sent my wife a message through the press, so I don't think it's that unusual.
Well, we also know that a lot of major religious groups are supporting immigration reform. The ACU has come out in favor of the Gang of Eight immigration bill, or something to that effect. And we also know a lot of agribusiness groups and agriculture industry officials support this bill as well. You're from Iowa, of course, a huge farming state. What are your constituents telling you, those who work as farmers and ranchers? What are they telling you about what they want you to do on immigration reform?
Well, it depends on what their vested interest is. The broad majority of my constituents want the rule of law enforced, and they understand that if you legalize people in any form, it ends up in citizenship. They understand that amnesty itself, the very definition of amnesty, is a pardon and a reward. It's a pardon for immigration lawbreakers coupled with a reward of the objective of their crime. But we do have people within Iowa that are advocating for some type of, they call it immigration reform. What they really, of course, mean is amnesty. And then they will tell me, I need someone to gather my eggs, or I need someone to harvest the hogs, I need somebody to milk my cows. Those are arguments. They get weighed in with all of this. But there are many, many businesses in the state and in the country that were developed and evolved into the businesses they are today because of the anticipation of having cheap illegal labor standing there ready to take those jobs. And so I remind them that We evolved into this dependency on illegal labor. We can evolve back to a place where we're no longer depending upon illegal labor, and in doing so, we'll see the wages go up, especially in the unskilled and the low-skilled jobs where we have today double-digit unemployment. The highest unemployment in this country is in the lowest skilled jobs. We don't need more unskilled people in America. We need a tighter labor supply, so those 80 different means-tested federal welfare programs don't need to be accessed by people. They can earn their own way. And I would think that would be something that Grover Norquist and I could agree on, but he seems to be an open borders advocate, and it seems that his endeavor is to seek to marginalize those who disagree with him on immigration.
Now, a moment ago you mentioned the issue of amnesty here, and this seems to be a big sticking point in the House on what to do moving forward. Would you describe amnesty as anything that allows people who are in this country illegally for any amount of time, for any reason, that if those folks are eventually allowed to gain full citizenship, that's what you would define as amnesty?
That's pretty close, John. I mean, I defined it as a pardon and a reward, a pardon for immigration lawbreakers coupled with the reward of the objective of their crime. I think that your definition is very close to that of mine, and that doesn't mean that there aren't groups of people in this country that that I have sympathy for. I do, and there are kids that were brought into this country by their parents unknowing that they were breaking the law, and they will say to me and others who defend the rule of law, we have to do something about the 11 million. And some of them are valedictorians. Well, my answer to that is, and then, by the way, their parents brought them in. It wasn't their fault. It's true in some cases, but they aren't all valedictorians. They weren't all brought in by their parents. For everyone who's a valedictorian, there's another 100 out there that they weigh 130 pounds and they've got calves the size of cantaloupes because they're hauling 75 pounds of marijuana across the desert. Those people would be legalized with the same act. And until the folks that want to open the borders and grant this amnesty can define the difference between the innocent ones who have deep ties with America and those who have been, I'll say, undermining our culture and civilization and profiting from criminal acts, until they can define that difference, they should not advocate for amnesty for both good and evil.
And how would you recommend separating the good from the bad?
I suggest that it can't be done, but you can protect and preserve the rule of law. It is an essential pillar of American exceptionalism, and if we grant amnesty to even a smaller component of this population of 11 million, then what we've done is we've set aside and destroyed the rule of law, at least with regard to immigration. We never could get it restored again. And I'd remind you, that's 1986, when Ronald Reagan signed the Amnesty Act and was honest enough to call it that. We've been trying to restore the rule of law, even and only with regard to immigration, and so far we're on the edge of being able to do that. If this Congress says, no, we are going to enforce the law and we're not going to reward lawbreakers, and then we have a chance to get it restored. If not, if Congress says it's politically too difficult for us right now to do that, then I would just tell you that if something like the Gang of Eights bill is passed into law, then forever the rule of law would no longer apply to immigration. Immigration law would be meaningless, and anybody that could get into America could stay. And by the way, the Gang of Eights bill also sends an invitation out to those who have been deported in the past and says, come on back into the United States, we really didn't mean it. Now, we've got some leaders that think that's a good idea, and I can't get myself around to that point of even seeing their point of view. They should, though, be able to see mine. They took an oath to uphold the Constitution after all.
And how many colleagues of yours in the House are in your camp on this? I mean, we heard Norquist say that there are a majority, he mentioned something like 70 to 80% of Republicans, when asked about this, are in favor of doing something, but that's not looking specifically at the House members. But the folks that you talk to, how many people agree with you on this and hold a different opinion than Grover Norquist?
Well, you can characterize this however you want. You can do that with polling questions too. It's how you phrase the question is how you get the answer. But those that stand exactly where I am, I don't know if I know that answer, but I will tell you that I don't know that I could find even one 3 months ago that I was sure of. And since we've been working this with weekly meetings and activities going on almost daily over the last 3 months, it's moved dramatically in the direction of where I stand. And those numbers of people that were say it started out with Lou Barletta and Steve King, and then Mo Brooks, and then Louis Gohmert, and then Michelle Bachmann, and now you continue to add these to this list. The number has gone from one or two or a pair to now it's numbered in dozens and scores, and it depends on the issue. But by and large, the majority of our conference wants to preserve the rule of law, and they do not want to grant amnesty. And I think that's something our leadership will recognize, and they've been increasingly recognize that as the weeks go by.
Well, we know, we've heard Speaker Boehner say there won't be a vote on this unless he knows that there can be a majority of Republicans who will favor some sort of immigration reform or some sort of bill, so we won't know the exact numbers at this point. But, you know, in a more general sense, there's a lot being said, and we talked about this a little bit, about the division within the GOP on this issue, and that division is often defined as one between Republicans with an interest in the national party or perhaps a bigger political office, and House members who maybe are more concerned about their own district. Is that division a myth, or is that really what you're seeing?
I would argue it's the exact opposite. The members who are standing up for and opposing amnesty are the ones that are keeping their oath of office and adhering to the rule of law. And they understand what happens in a civilization. If you reward people for breaking the law, you get more lawbreakers. We have some establishment Republicans that have long been for some type of open borders. They call it comprehensive immigration reform. I sent a letter to President Bush through Karl Rove on January 6, 2004, on the eve of President Bush's first pro-comprehensive immigration reform speech that he gave. That launched the effort on what Karl Rove believed was the outreach to the Hispanic voting group. That's been driven ever since. January 2004, and here we are in July of 2013 and moving on. They've believed in this. They characterized it the way they chose to characterize it. On the morning of November 7th of last year, when I woke up after the election, I understood that election was about jobs and the economy, and I do not remember an exchange between Barack Obama and Mitt Romney on a debate on immigration at all. Yet, before the sun came up that morning, the open borders advocates in the Republican Party had characterized Romney's loss because he said two words: self-deport. I think that ignores a lot. And the reason that Mitt Romney's not president is because there were millions of conservatives who were not mobilized enough and activated enough to come to the polls. They didn't get energized enough. It wasn't because Mitt Romney put off the Hispanic vote. He lost about 4% from John McCain's, from 31% down to 27%. It wasn't about immigration. The debate wasn't about immigration. It was characterized that way by people who benefit from open borders. And I'll put them in three categories. One are the elitists. Elitists see that they should have somehow access to cheap labor to clean their homes for them and mow their lawns for them and take care of their gardens for them. Second category is Democrat power brokers that see a tremendous advantage to the Democrat Party. This turns this into a one-party system if they do what they're trying to do with the Gang 8 bill in the Senate. And the third category are those employers of illegals who benefit from cheap labor at the expense of the taxpayers who are subsidizing through the welfare programs. So if you want to support the elitists or Democrat power brokers or employers of illegal labor, then support the Gang of 8, listen to Grover, listen to Karl Rove. If you want to defend the Constitution, the rule of law, and preserve a better destiny for the United States of America where individuals can make a living with their hands, their back, their mind, standing on their own 2 feet, then stand with me. That's the difference, and that's how it should be divided.
Well, Congressman, last question for you. You know, we've talked about the Hastert rule as well, and for folks who don't know, that's a rule where the Speaker of the House won't bring something for a vote, a full House floor vote, unless he knows he has a majority of members of Congress in support of that. But do you think in this case that maybe Speaker Boehner should just bring this bill to the floor for a vote just to get an up-down gauge on where members of the House stand on this?
No, I don't. I think that would be a tactic that would cause a lot of division within our conference, and I would expect Speaker Boehner would come to that same conclusion. There is a perverse incentive in me, though, that wants to answer you this way, John. I'd like to see the Senate Gang of 8 bill come to the floor of the House of Representatives and voted down. And at that point, then, we could push it off onto the side and say the immigration debate is over. We have Benghazi to investigate. We've got IRS targeting the president's political enemies to investigate. We've got corruption in this government. We've got a Department of Justice that's playing the race card and driving wedges against people and spending taxpayer dollars in places like Florida to try to bring out hate crimes legislation, politically motivated in my view. There are many things we must do as well as balancing the budget. We've got to deal with the debt ceiling that hasn't been even calculated to increase in 57 days now. now. And where this all is sitting on the side because we're focused wrongly on immigration, because too many people on the establishment wing of the Republican Party have fallen into a trap that I think is set by people like Chuck Schumer in the United States Senate.
Well, that debate, of course, is raging on, and I think a lot of Americans, whether they're for or against immigration reform, would like to see that vote as well, just so they can know where their representatives stand. Congressman Steve King, thanks so much for reaching out to us. Always a pleasure to talk to you, and thanks for your time, sir.
Thank you very much, John.
And thank you for watching Newsmax TV.